It is now my honor to invite our next distinguished guest to speak with us. This is Miss Julie Woodson. She's currently the president and CEO of the North Carolina Association of Community College Trustees, where she's served as president and CEO for about 3 years. And she's been with the organization for about 10 years total. We invited Ms. Woodson because we know that many of our colleges right now are sort of yearly in the springtime is when we elect student government officers. So there may be some students online who may be considering running for student body president for next year. And boy, what a world it will look like in terms of what our new reality will be in the summer and fall, hopefully as we return to some normalcy. And so we definitely wanted you to hear from the folks training our trustees to serve our colleges and serve our students. So we wanted to bring Ms. Woodson's expertise to the forefront. Secondly, just 2 random trivia facts. Did you know that it is in state legislation that a student must sit on a community college board of trustees as a non-voting member or ex officio member, as well as a student must sit on the state board of community college as a non-voting / ex officio member, and that's both of those are in state legislation. And so, without further ado, I'll turn it over to Ms. Woodson. She'll go further in depth with her presentation, and we'll thank you for starting.
First of all, I want to thank you all for your willingness to serve at your college and for being student leaders and for being SGA presidents or considering that opportunity. It's interesting that a lot of SGA presidents think, well, you know, you're serving in that capacity, and they're sometimes surprised when that requirement is there that they need to sit on a board of trustees. And so I want you all to learn a little bit more about the great responsibility and the great opportunity that SGA presidents bring to the Board of Trustees. And we will talk, as Dr. Evans said, in terms of some of the legal requirements and what's in general statute, but also some of the roles and responsibilities that you would have as an SGA president, or even as another officer at your college as you bring the perspective of the student forward. So as we look at who serves on the board, here's an overview of what we're going to talk about today. Who serves on the Board of Trustees? What does a Board of Trustees actually do? What is the primary role of the SGA president on the board? How can the SGA president make a real difference on the board? And things to keep in mind if you do get to that point and serve on the board. And then time, of course, for questions and discussion. And then we can sprinkle if in the chat you do have questions, I'll try to answer them as we go along, or we can save them into the end, just whatever you would prefer. We talked about at the beginning some of the general statutes that govern what a board of trustees includes. And there are some boards that are larger than this because they have a large service area or cover several counties, or they have different local provisions that have been adopted for their particular area. But most of our colleges do include 13 members. 4 trustees elected by the local Board of Education, 4 trustees elected by the local Board of Commissioners, 4 trustees appointed by the governor of North Carolina, and then, yes, as Dr. Evans said, the president of the student government shall be an ex officio non-voting member of the board. So there are different powers and duties of the trustees that are also in general statute, and that's in section 115D-20 that governs the powers and duties of the trustees. They elect the community college president, subject to approval by the State Board of Community Colleges. They purchase land, easements, or right of ways necessary for the proper operation of the institution. They work with the president to choose programs that best fit the needs of the students, businesses, and the community. And we are very fortunate in North Carolina that we have a lot of local autonomy. Each of our 58 community colleges truly reflect the communities in which they serve. They look at the different business needs in those areas. They look at the needs of the students and the communities, as well as what is actually needed. They're nimble, they're quick, they're able to adjust to those specific communities. So it's very good that we do have that local autonomy that helps us when we are moving things forward in those particular communities. What is the primary responsibility of SGA President? It's a great opportunity to bring the perspectives of the students into the boardroom. We talked about the specific responsibilities of the boards in terms of building projects and deciding different programs, hiring the president, a lot of different details. But the SGA president truly brings the student into the boardroom. They are able to ask the good questions to make sure that the focus remains on the students. You know better than anyone else, based on the communication with others as well as your own perspective, what issues the students are facing. College affordability, student debt could be an issue, balancing family and college, balancing college and work. Some students are even homeless and don't have enough to eat. These are things that you can make sure that this board does not lose sight of. Whatever issues are at your college that you're hearing from your student body, it is your responsibility and your privilege to bring those perspectives to the boardroom. We talk about making a difference and making your voice heard. And sometimes that's easier said than done. So I actually talked to some former SGA presidents about things that they learned or comments or tips that they thought that they would like to share and what they would have wanted to know before they ran for SGA president or before they served in that role. So the next section focuses on some of those things that I learned from them. Board meetings may be overwhelming at first. The board may be talking about issues that are unfamiliar to you. They're new. Many of the other trustees may be much older than you. Some of you are shaking your head. Oh, yes, older, yes. We did actually a survey a couple of years ago, and the trustees, the average age was 62 years old. Yes, 62. So you may be serving with business leaders in your community. You may be serving with former state legislators, current commissioners. Some SGA presidents sit beside their elementary school teachers who have since retired and may be serving as a Board of Education appointee to the Community College Board. So you're sitting around, you're looking at these much older people in a lot of circumstances, and you think, how in the world can I make my voice be heard? The other former SGA presidents that I talked to said it's important to make sure that as soon as you step in there, that you realize that the other students are counting on you. Your voice makes a difference. Everything won't go your way, but you never know unless you speak up. I talked to one SGA president who says she's naturally an introvert. So it was difficult at first, but she kept making sure that she was asking questions, that she was making sure that she clarified and verified what she thought she was understanding from the board meeting. And she said eventually the trustees would turn to her and would say, so what do you think as the student? So it's establishing those relationships and building that trust and speaking up. Don't be afraid to ask the hard questions, and make sure that the entire board understands the student perspective. Some say the SGA president is actually the most important person on the board. You can keep the board focused on students. You could say, for example, this sounds like a good idea. Can you be more specific about how it impacts student success? Because, as I mentioned before, there are so many details that a board has to make sure that they focus on, that if you can keep looping those issues back to students, student success, and the student perspective, you can make sure that the board stays on track. And I assure you, the trustees will appreciate that. You could use firsthand knowledge about how something would or would not work based on your experiences as a student at your college, or you could tell real-world scenarios about what other students are experiencing. So continue to listen to your student body, get their input, and make sure that if you hear about issues that you can reflect those real-world situations on in the boardroom, make sure you do that. Tips from the former SGA presidents on how you can share the student perspective. Invite other trustees to campus events and student meetings so that they can interact with other students. On the other hand, also invite students to attend trustee meetings and community events where students can meet with community leaders. Sometimes we hear that SGA presidents do feel younger and that they feel like they are not respected as much as some of the older people. But also, I've talked to some board chairs who say often they know that the SGA president is so busy that they are overwhelmed with some of their other responsibilities. That's why that they don't ask them to attend as many things. And so I told the board chairs that they need to keep those lines of communication open so that they can ask the SGA president if it is too overburdensome. Don't assume that the SGA president doesn't want to attend anything. Make sure that they're included with all the trustee events. And at the same time, as an SGA president, please speak up. If you hear of an event that you would like to attend, please make sure that they know that you are interested in doing it. Because a lot of times they do want students there, but they want to be cognizant of your responsibilities. So make sure that they know that you're interested. Being a team player and building relationships. Trusteeship is not an individual act. It is expressed by being a valuable member of a team of people who together comprise the legal unit that governs the college. That means that as you bring the SGA president perspective in the room, that you also respect the other perspectives that are around the table as well. As you listen to the different leaders discuss their particular perspective, it's important that you are a team player, you build relationships, and that you keep communication open with all of the trustees, especially the board chairs. When you do serve as an SGA president or even officer at your college, please be mindful that everything you do in that leadership role makes a difference. And the former SGA presidents wanted me to remind you all, social media guidelines. We are so in tune to Twitter, Facebook, social media, Instagram, Snapchat, TikTok, all the fun things. But when you are reflecting anything at the college or from the college, please be mindful that other people are looking at you as student leaders. Don't engage in a Twitter or Facebook war or any other social media war if someone disagrees with you or the board. Sometimes you may hear other students complaining, saying negative things about the board or the college, and you will want to step up and take up for your people or your trustees. But Be mindful again that if you are in that conversation, that you're perpetuating it and making it go farther than it probably needs to be. So each of your boards will have a communication strategy, usually in their policies. So make sure that you adhere to that in terms of who is speaking on behalf of your board. Never to discuss legal, confidential, or sensitive information that you hear in the boardroom. Make sure that you are mindful of posting something as a trustee because your comments do matter. When you do step into the boardroom as an SGA president, let them know that you want to be a valued member of the board. Explain that you want to be more than just someone who shows up and makes a report at the meetings. Sometimes we hear the SGA presidents get frustrated that they feel like they are relegated only to the part of the board meeting where there's an SGA report. Explain emphatically that you do want to be more than that. You want to be more than just someone who shows up. You want to build relationships with the board members, communicate openly, honestly, and consistently. If you feel that you aren't being heard or that your questions are not being respected, make sure that you express that, especially to the board chair. Even between board meetings, say, actually, I wanted to say something, but my question was pushed aside a little bit and I felt like it wasn't heard. At the next board meeting, I would like to be recognized again for that particular question. Just make sure that they understand that you do want to be heard. Attend community events when you are invited. That means that board meetings are important, but they're not the only time that you should engage in board activities. Whether it's a graduation where you're sitting in the audience, whether it's a business ribbon cutting, whether it's a opportunity to meet with state legislators, make sure that you show up and step up. When board members meet with legislators, for example, at the college or in Raleigh, step up and let the board chair know you want to be a part of the discussion. Elected leaders always want to hear the student's perspective. And actually, a lot of times we will be meeting in the halls of the General Assembly talking about community college issues, and we will be in a group, and the legislators will say, are there any students here? I want to hear from them. So step up, let the board members know that you want to be an active part of the conversation. And as you build those relationships, they will know that you are building that respect and building that communication in the boardroom and beyond. This is from Tony Formato. She's a former N4 CSGA president and SGA president at Randolph Community College. Some of you may know her. I reached out to her specifically to ask her, how can you be heard and be taken seriously? If you are a younger member of the board, if you are an SGA president who wants to make sure that they are respected, she says, remain professional during these meetings, be respectful, dress the role. If you see that board of trustees are dressing in professional dress or in other ways that reflect the attitude within the boardroom, make sure you dress the role. Refrain from actions that may seem unprofessional, such as using your cell phone or being late to meetings. She says, your opinion is very important as a student, and the board knows that. She said that it took a while for her to feel comfortable to start asking those hard questions because she did feel like a younger person in the room. But she said the board started turning to her and saying, well, what do you think about a certain issue? So she worked hard at the beginning to build those relationships. Be present and be prepared in board meetings. Expanding some on that. Show up to board meetings and events. read your materials before the board meeting starts. Presidents at community colleges say that they send board materials out, and for all trustees that they ask the presidents do that their materials are read so that they can begin the conversation and not be answering questions that are answered in the materials. So read your materials, provide input to the president's office when requested in a timely way. So if you get an email from the president's office and says, how many of you all will be attending a groundbreaking at a local business, or who will be attending a teleconference, please make sure you respond, be on time at meetings, make your trustee role a top priority because you are important. That's something I consistently heard from SGA presidents who had served, as well as trustees and chair people themselves and the presidents. Engage the other officers and have fun. Tony also said it's important to have good, I'm sorry, there's a typo here, have good communication with your advisor and the other officers. She said she even brought her secretary to a board of trustees dinner so that she could meet the trustees. Make sure you and your team are having fun as well. Serving as a president is one of her most favorite memories, so enjoy it. So that's one of the things that she made sure that she wanted you all to understand, that it's overwhelming at first, that you are in the room with a lot of different business leaders and community leaders, and it can be overwhelming, but make sure you engage with them, make sure you engage your other officers, make sure you step up, speak out, because you can have a lot of fun. And she also mentioned that her role as an SGA president has carried over. She's currently at UNC at Chapel Hill, and that her role as an SGA president has taken her to some other opportunities. She said she's currently working in the admissions office, and that when she was interviewed, they asked her a lot about her SGA government experience, and she even helped the SGA president at UNC with that person's campaign with transfer students, because that he wanted to reach out to transfer students to discuss issues that are important to them. So she was a great resource, and those are some comments that she had. So that's an overview of what trustees do at different colleges, what the legal roles are, what the responsibilities are, some tips for serving as an SGA president. So what questions do you all have? So we had a question, how should we prepare to be an SGA president or SGA trustee? I would say learn the most you can about your college beforehand. There are specific issues related to your particular area and your particular community, so that you can hit the ground running if you do run for SGA president and you do serve as a trustee. If you are considering running for SGA president, I would suggest meeting with the president or meeting with the chairman of the board to discuss what they perceive as the role of the SGA president and suggestions they may have. Okay, I have a question. Many of my students are in early middle college. Can you talk about how we should train our younger students if your college allows them to participate? Well, I would say that early and middle college is such a growing audience within the community colleges, so it's so important to engage them. So I would make sure that you reach out to them when they are new at the college or participating, maybe through like little survey monkeys or little ways that you can communicate with them electronically, because you all are very engaged online, and these younger students are especially engaged. So reaching out to them to ask them what's on their mind, ask them what questions they may have about the college, and see if they have anything specifically that you may be able to address, because as an SGA president, you're representing the whole student body. So if there are particular issues that they may have, make sure that they are reflected as well. Any other questions? Can you talk about ethics and code of conduct? That goes back to the role that we talked about in terms of making sure that when you step into the SGA president role or any officer role, you have to realize that when you are in your community, you are a reflection of your community college. There is a code of conduct and list of ethical practices that the National Association has put together that does include making sure that you are representing the community well, even in social situations, that when you step into the boardroom, that you only wear your board of trustee hat, that sometimes you may be so busy within the community or so busy as an SGA person that you may be wearing a lot of hats. You may be doing different things in the community, in your church, in civic clubs, or in other ways. But when you walk into the boardroom, you have to make sure that you wear your board of trustee hat only, and that you're reflecting your perspective as a student and a trustee only. So you need to make sure you adhere to that. What guidelines could prevent you from being able to serve or to run? Well, I think that you would, as long as you are an SGA president and have went through the proper protocol in terms of fulfilling the requirements at your community college. It does say that the SGA president will serve on your local board. The provisions that say that somebody cannot serve as a trustee, including like employees at the college or currently serving legislators, can't be appointed to the board. So as long as you adhere to the requirements at your college, from my understanding, you would be able to serve on your local board. One of the issues that I talked about some, but I want to emphasize the importance of, is your role as an advocate for your college. When you work with elected officials and communicate with elected officials at the local and the state levels. As I mentioned, when we go to the General Assembly, they often say, is there a student here who can offer their perspective? And even at the local level, community colleges get their capital funding or their building facilities dollars from the local board of commissioners. And so when you are communicating with the commissioners, either at meetings at your college or in your community, make sure that you have a good story to tell about your college. I always say that trustees are the best advocates for their college. They can set the narrative for their community college and make sure that the good news that's going on at your college is shared, especially with those local leaders. How can we urge our board and those in the community who are struggling to afford food due to the COVID-19 shutting down public schools? I think it's saying, how can we urge our board to help in the community? Well, several community colleges are already directing some of their supplies, whether it's masks or medical supplies that they may have had for their first responders classes. They are sending them to hospitals in different locations and across the regions. And some colleges who have food banks or food pantries are donating food items to public schools if they do have community drop-offs, or to regional food banks. And I would continue to communicate with your board chair about how your local board is assisting. There are several food banks that are taking actual items, and they're also taking financial donations. So you can communicate with your board and ask them how they are assisting, but most of the boards are already stepping up. I've been so proud, actually, when you look at the news and you see the people that are at the forefront of this COVID-19 pandemic, that the ones that are showing up are the first responders, the ones who have been trained from our community colleges, the nurses, the EMTs, firefighters who are responding to needs. So a lot of our colleges are responding already. What's the best way to build yourself up to become SGA president? Currently, I'm a senator and I want to do more and be more engaged. That is excellent. I think that you continue to articulate your desire to move ahead, whether it's talking to the current SGA president, whether it's talking to the community college president at your particular institution, reaching out to your board chair, and sending an email and saying, these are the things I've done. These are the things that I have learned as a senator at my college, and making sure that, it's seeking advice from them. Show respect and say, I know that you have served in your capacity as a board chair, or served in your capacity as a president, or served in your capacity as a former SGA president. What advice do they have in terms of articulating your desire, articulating your experience, and moving things forward and putting you in the position that you want to be in? So reaching out to others who are in leadership positions, as well as also, if you see things in your community that are engaging the community college, once we get past the social distancing, of course, if you see business groundbreakings, or if you see surveys that are being circulated within the community about your community college from the Chamber of Commerce or other groups, make sure that you let your voice be heard. The more that you are known and building those relationships, the more you can make a difference and make sure that people know that you're willing to serve. What is your recommendation for conducting elections for SGA president, given our current situation of working remotely, not being on campus? I think that there are so many things that can be done online now. I think that you'll have to look at your particular college to see if there is a way to reach out to other students or the student body. I do think that in some instances elections can be done online, but it's more difficult. I would continue to use every avenue of social media that you have, whether it's YouTube or reaching out to fellow students to let them know you're interested. Dr. Evans, do you know of any recommendations that you're getting from institution about the SGA elections?
Yes, ma'am. So last week on our student life call, we had some very spirited discussions on how campuses are going to try different election practices. So there's been discussion of, posting the participants who are running for different offices on the SGA website or Facebook page, or some sort of social media outlet. And then in terms of trying to conduct elections or get the voice out to students. Many colleges are going to explore using their, Moodle or Sakai or Blackboard sites in terms of, we'll have SGA elections for these next 3 days. Click here. When you sign into Moodle, you'll see a little announcement about it, and then those votes will be counted, and then we'll move forward in terms of the process. I have heard discussions on maybe doing interviews for SGA president. I think there's not really one clear, concise pathway that everybody's choosing. I think everybody's sort of figuring out what best works for their local campus.
Excellent. And as I said, there's great challenge and opportunity with local autonomy, because there's not one size fits all, which is frustrating for some, because some like a formula and say, well, this is how we're going to do it because that's how everybody's doing it. But because of the local autonomy, we do have the opportunity to develop the systems that will work best for the colleges. So I know that our colleges are working very, very hard to move forward with electronic learning, to keep everybody on track with that, as well as these very important elections that we have coming up with SGA president and other officers. Any other questions or thoughts?
As of right now, those are all the questions in the question box.
Okay. Did I miss anything, Dr. Evans, that you had thought about over time in terms of serving as a trustee, or have you heard from SGA president some frustrations or thoughts that you'd like to share?
I think something that you touched on briefly, maybe you could expound on it, is, say a college goes through the elections, it's over the summer, before the school year starts and before the student goes to their first meeting. What are some things that they can do or try to sort of catch up so that the first meeting isn't so overwhelming? Or is there something that they can study, or do they have an opportunity to read prior board minutes before their first meeting? Like what's your gear up strategy for new trustees?
I think that's a great question, and I'd love to work with you perhaps on putting together some general guidelines for SGA presidents, including some of the things I've talked about today, but also some thoughts and ideas on who they could reach out to. If it was me, if it were me, I would set up a little interview with the board chairman and with the president of the college, and say just that. Say, I would like 30 minutes of your time to interview you and to pick your brain and to let you know I want to dive in, hit the ground running, and I want to hear some of the top 3 issues that your board is dealing with at this time. And they may say, we're trying to deal with some online learning. We're trying to deal with a building project at our campus. We know that the legislature is going to be meeting in the short session beginning this summer, and we are going to try to figure out how we can best be advocates for our system-wide legislative agenda. And if you hear those 3 items, for example, and you could say, okay, I hear these 3, how as the SGA president can I be most effective? For example, I may not be able to help with the building project, but I can provide some thoughts on some pros and cons of what I've been seeing in terms of online learning and some of the challenges that we're facing. I will not give you 17 challenges. I will give you 2 or something like that, or say, okay, if our board is looking at ways we can be the best legislative advocates as possible, as a student government representative, SGA president on your board, I want to go to the state legislature when you visit the General Assembly, or if you all have a meeting at your college with state legislators, I, as SGA president, want to be there. And I'll, try to provide a good perspective as I can from the student side. So that's what I would do. I would just step right up and say, I want to interview the president and the board chair. This is what I want. This is what I need from you. What do you need from me? Because open, consistent communication is so important, especially because your opportunity is 1 year long. Regular trustees, they serve 4-year terms. So they have a lot of time to get a better understanding before they feel like they have to be engaged. But when you step into that SGA president role in that 1 year time frame, it's so important that you start early. So I look forward to working with you, Dr. Evans. We maybe could put together some thoughts and tips and expound on what we've discussed today. Any other questions?
I'm going to ask a question that's probably going to get me in trouble, but I'll ask it anyway. Can you discuss your thoughts on compensation for the SGA president? And, some colleges either offer it as a scholarship, some offer it as a stipend, some don't pay anything to their SGA president. Can you just maybe share sort of your thoughts on compensation surrounding trustees in terms of gifts? And, I know there may be some policy about receiving like monetary and other types of gifts, that type of thing. So maybe sort of circle all that into one answer.
I checked with our wonderful lawyer / government affairs person, Mary Shuping, to see if SGA presidents were covered persons subject to the statement of economic interest and other ways. And it's under understanding that is not an issue. That's something we may can look at further, but we had seen general statute that did not include SGA presidents. Trustees, in some states, all trustees are compensated. In North Carolina, trustees in general are not compensated. They are not. And that's one of the frustrations that all the trustees have sometimes, because the time commitment is pressing. You have a lot of meetings related to general issues. If there is a building project, you may have several meetings. If trustees are asked to go to community events, they are not compensated. So if the SGA was, the whole board would probably need to look at payment. I think some colleges give mileage and the small stipend, maybe. But overall, it's not a given for any trustee. So it probably need to be looked at as a chunk. If it were me, I do know that trustees are able to go to some meetings, like at the state level and even the federal level, with the National Legislative Summit, with the National Association. And I saw a trustee or SGA president from Sandhills Community College actually was at that meeting. And then sometimes SGA president comes to the state meeting, and those are paid for. And if it were me, I would want to gobble up all the opportunities of leadership and training that I could possibly get during my 1 year window as an SGA president. And rather than compensation, I would say I would want to seek out those training opportunities and ask if I could attend those and ask if that could be covered, because usually there are budgets for that trustee training piece. So does that make sense, and does that sound reasonable, Dr. Evans?
Yes, ma'am.
And as I said, you can reach out to your particular institutions, colleges, to ask specifically about your particular areas and needs. But that's what I would do.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any final questions for Ms. Woodson? Please ask it now in the question box. Any final questions? All right, not seeing any. So Ms. Woodson, definitely thank you for your time and expertise today. We've already had some requests for your presentation, so feel free to send that over at any time and I'll make sure it gets posted and shared. Definitely, we look forward to learning from you and partnering with you in the future on some training and some documentation for our future SGA presidents and our current folks who are in student government. And as always, thank you for everything that you do for our students, and please protect yourself and your family.
Thank you so much. It's an honor to be with you all today, and thank you. I'll be communicating with you, and I'll send my presentation over in just a few minutes. Thanks.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we have about, let's say 15 minutes before our next presenters jump on the line. So feel free to take a restroom and stretch break. And I'm going to do the same. And I will be back in just a moment.